Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Daniel Torres of SpaceChimpsComics. Welcome to the show.
What's going on, man? I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. So with every question we always have for every guest that comes on, of all the hobbies you could choose, of all the things you could get into, a large collective of us all ended up at comic books. Where does your journey begin?
Yeah, man. So I guess it kind of starts in the early 90s with the Batman the Animated Series cartoon.
Yes.
Excuse me. I was probably, 5 or 6 years old when the cartoon was airing on Fox. I remember watching it with my dad all the time, running around the house, wishing I was Batman, playing with the play set, the Batcave play set and all that stuff. And I've always loved writing. I've been a lifelong comic book fan, comic book collector, lover of all things nerdy, as you can tell, behind me here.
There you go.
And last year, my dad, who is an award-winning journalist, he's been a reporter working for newspapers for the last 30 years. He approached me and told me that he was working on a comic book script. And I happened to be working on one at the exact same time. So we kind of just, decided to pool our efforts and create SpaceChimpsComics. And we've been doing it for the last year and a half or so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think there's many people that can say that their comic book is kind of in the like it's a family thing. I mean, the only person I know of is Matt Kint, who just did a comic book with his mom.
Right.
Which similar story for you guys. How does that feel working? Because it's nice to work with someone that kind of, or even collaborate or bounce ideas off of someone that, he helped raise you and his stories. And does it make the process easier?
It does, man. It does, because so the way we're kind of formatting it is I write one issue, I hire my own artists, and then he writes the next issue. So Tales from Toxic Pond, it's kind of like a standalone anthology, kind of in the same vein as like Tales from the Crypt, Twilight Zone, where each issue is a standalone story. So, he reads my scripts, I read his, we kind of bounce ideas back off of one another, collaborate with a lot of the same artists and whatnot. So it's been fun, man. Every day he and I are texting, calling each other, talking about what we're working on. He's showing me his covers, I'm showing him mine. It's been fun, man. I can't imagine doing this with anybody else, honestly.
Definitely. And he's got quite a background in writing, which I think the biggest question is, did you go to like post-secondary school or anything for writing, or did you kind of jump into it?
No, not really. I actually have a master's degree in environmental science, so it's kind of the complete opposite of the arts and literature and whatnot. But we wrote a lot of papers every week in grad school. But no, I've always been interested in writing. I took some creative writing classes in undergrad. I did a little bit of writing for an environmental publication, and I've written plays and short stories and stuff, and figured, why not? Let me try my hand at trying to, write some comic books. And, so we're on our third issue right now.
Awesome. Was it difficult to make that switch? I mean, obviously you have academia, which let's say a good chunk of us know, words count, intensive. And obviously your father, journalism, it's all, even if it's not sensational story, it's all hard facts, interviews and whatnot. And now you're going to a document where someone says, hey, you want to, a duck who gets a wand and becomes an evil wizard, like that's your jam, go with it. There's no rules to it. So you're going kind of almost from strict writing to complete freedom. Was it difficult in that regards?
A little bit. To be honest, I think that the most difficult thing was the formatting, actually, and trying to convey sequential storytelling, because you can write a short story, you can write a play, and, you're really just putting out what's happening in that scene, very basic stage direction and dialogue. But with the comic book, it's a little different. You don't really know, how well the artist is going to work. Do they want a lot of detail? Do they want to kind of make it up on their own? So trying to convey what's going on in the story has been, a different type of challenge, but it's also been fun and a cool way of, challenging ourselves to change the way we write.
So what was the process like for your first comic book? Because obviously you guys must have had a pretty good idea to jump right into kind of doing a creator-owned comic book line company. So I'm assuming you just and you do have to just kind of go for it. I think that's what a lot of indie creators would tell you once you get that idea to just kind of go in. But where did you go from there? Because I mean, I think we all read comic books lifelong and we want to make one.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you stop and actually think about like, all right, how do we make one? How'd you guys do that whole process?
Yeah. So, Travis Gibb, another local creator. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. He does Orange Cone Productions. He's done like Coins of Judas, Granite State Punk. Incredible writer. He's a local guy that I knew. He actually used to be the IT guy at one of my old jobs. So when he would come in, he and I would talk comics and stuff. And he's been doing this for like probably 10 years or so. So he's a bigger name in the game over here than I am at this point. But no, I just kind of texted him one day, asked him if he wanted to meet at Dunkin' Donuts for some coffee. Told him my idea and basically asked him how to go about getting started. And he hooked me up with some artists, some pencilers, some letterers, colorists, all that jazz. And basically gave me the rundown. He helped us set up the first Kickstarter page. And he's introduced me to a lot of, awesome indie creators on the Kickstarter scene. And so we're kind of learning as we go, but I think by issue 3 now we have a pretty good idea of what we're doing, at least in terms of hiring artists and getting the scripts written and all that stuff. So still trying to work on the promotion aspect and getting our names out there, but that comes in time, I guess.
Exactly. Was there anything in this process that kind of surprised you about comics?
I think the probably the lengthy amount of time it takes to actually put one together.
Yes.
You can read a comic book and you look at the art and it's incredible and you're looking at the colors and they're amazing, but it's not really until you actually start making a comic that you're like, oh wow, okay, yeah, so I have a separate person for the pencils and then I have a separate person for the inks and a separate person for the colors, and you kind of start looking at things a little differently. Like when I read comic books now, I'm a little more critical and I look at the lettering and I look at the fonts that they're using in a way that I didn't before. So I would say probably just the lengthy amount of time it takes to get the artwork back and to actually have a finished product is probably the most surprising thing. I don't know how guys like Jeff Lemire, Ram V are putting out 3 or 4 books a month. I mean, that's incredible. Kudos to them.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because when we talk to people at our comic conventions, and you always tell people, they didn't just pick up, Geoff Johns didn't just be like, I'm gonna make a comic book. It's the 1st of September. I'll have it ready to print and in hands by September 30th.
Right.
He's probably been working on this since like February or January, and he made a couple progress points. He got kind of issue 2 and 3 ready, but focused on issue 1. And what you're seeing is just a lot of planning.
Yeah,
I think that takes a lot of people by surprise.
Oh yeah.
With artists, that's always a difficult one. And I think for a lot of indie creators, they found that I wouldn't say Fiverr and kind of Upwork has really produced some amazing artists, especially a lot of artists overseas. Mm-hmm. I know Spain and I think Portugal and I think Brazil. I've seen a lot of art come out of there, which is very good. How easy is it learning the art scene? Because I mean, as much as we would all love to have Jorge Jimenez or Magnola stop by and be like, yeah, no, I'll totally do it. It would be great. Right. We do have to source our talent and kind of make sure that it matches with us. And there's a lot of competition everywhere.
Yeah, you're not kidding, man. I think my dad actually hired a couple people off of Upwork. He's hired some pencilers off there. Basically, I've kind of met my people off of Facebook and Instagram. There's so many comic book groups out there. You put one post out there looking for an artist and you get 100 DMs, people showing you their portfolios and stuff. I've been fortunate to find artists from Brazil. He did our first issue, and the guy that I'm working with right now that did the third issue was actually from Indonesia. And kind of, similar. He posted his portfolio on Facebook, and I shot him a message, and his price point per page was incredible. And the guy does amazing work, and he's a joy to work with. So that's kind of the cool thing about social media and the internet is that I can work with somebody all the way across the world on a project. His first language isn't English. I don't speak his language, but we're able to kind of collaborate on this cool story together and get our point across and work together. It's awesome.
Definitely. And with this project, obviously you mean for every issue to kind of be a little bit different story as you bounce, you do an issue your father. Did you guys also decide early on that you would want to do that with artwork, and then kind of like, maybe we don't do the same artist for every issue, we get those different artists to show almost kind of a diversification that this is a break in that universe that we're creating?
Pretty much, man. Yeah, we're basically trying to use each issue as like a showcase for different artists, so I think my first issue was almost done by the time my dad started working on his second issue. And the plan originally was to use the same artist, but he found a guy that he really liked, and enjoyed working with, and hired him for the project. So the interior artist on the first issue, he's basically become our cover A artist. So he's doing all the cover A's for the book. And we're just kind of finding these new guys that want to work and are incredible artists and are completely unknown in the comic book world, and giving them an opportunity to work on something, and it's been a lot of fun.
Now, with all this work and you guys building this brand up, when did it first kind of sink in to you guys that, we are making a comic book and like it's coming out and we're going to promote it? Like we're technically in the comic book industry now. Was there like a pivotal moment where you're just like, man, this really did happen?
Honestly, it wasn't until we got the books back from the printer and we opened them up, and I ran over to his house with a couple boxes from our printer, and we opened them up together, and we opened up that front cover, and I saw my name in there, and we looked at the pages, and it really wasn't until we got them back from the printer that it felt real. The whole funding process was exciting. Getting the pages back every day is exciting, but it wasn't until we had that finished product in our hands that we were like, hey, we did this, and that was a really cool feeling and an achievement in and of itself.
Yeah, no, I think most people would agree with that. You could have the most awesomest, the most badass cover, fire everywhere, whatever, but until you see like either in black or whatever font you choose, just your name, that small little name across the bottom or top, that is the best artwork you might ever see on that first issue, because it's hard to believe that like that's your book.
Right, exactly. Yeah, man, it was a pretty cool, kind of surreal feeling, opening up that book and just seeing, this script that I had written and lettered and all that stuff like together and finish and put out there in the world for people to either enjoy or hate, so.
Yeah, and it's great. I mean, Kickstarter and what's the other one? Oh, it's gonna haunt me but with the Kickstarter and the other one, I can't remember what it is. Obviously, you funded. You got your books out. Now, is this also something you would want to go to your local LCS and see if they would carry your books, or did you guys decide, let's do kind of strictly to the people, kind of by the people, self-funded?
No, so we actually put a retailer tier on the Kickstarter.
Okay.
I reached out to the owner of my LCS, and he was more than happy to support the book, and he backed the retailer tier, so he got all the covers. I threw him a couple extra, foil freebies and stuff for the store because I go there every week, But so that was cool too, delivering the books to the comic book shop, and then going in on New Comic Book Day and seeing our book, right there on the shelves alongside everything from Marvel and DC and everybody else. That was really cool. So we're trying to branch out to a couple other, local comic book shops. But yeah, mainly, just going through Kickstarter right now and trying to build an audience and a following.
And then before we get into the reason we're here, is there plans then to start kind of the convention circuit? Because usually when people ask me and they say, I just got one book coming out, should I do the convention? It's not a bad idea, but it's hard to direct people. They said, oh, I kind of like the story, but what else do you have? And you're like, well, I have this and only this. Where once you kind of get to that second or even third book, ideally, then you kind of got, well, we have these kind of issues. I'm working on this issue. You have more examples to showcase. For you guys, is that I'm assuming that was definitely in the horizon to go to conventions.
For sure, yeah, we're actually looking at a local show here in Central Florida in October. Kind of a smaller show just to get our feet wet, and it's got a smaller table fee. And at that point we'll have 3 issues out. We're working on branching out to a couple different titles, but that's kind of the beautiful thing with like a standalone excuse me, a standalone anthology is like, hey, if you don't like the story in the first issue, maybe you'll enjoy the story in the second issue, so we definitely have plans to do some cons, hopefully more in 2025, but we're looking at least one here in the the fourth quarter of 2024.
Awesome. And then one last question before we move on. Where does SpaceChimpsComics come from? Because I've seen a lot of very creative names that have come through the show. This one is up there for most creative.
Yeah, man. So, we live in Central Florida. We live on the Space Coast. We're about a half hour south of Kennedy Space Center. And just some sort of, inside joke that my dad would always say growing up. He would like to say, space chimps in space, just something completely nonsensical that nobody else would understand. But when we were, workshopping names, he brought up Space Chimp Comics, and I was like, yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome. And here we are today, which brings us to the whole point of why we're here today. That is for your Kickstarter. That is, I don't know if it's live right now. As people are listening. Okay, so we are live, and that is going to be Tales from Toxic Pond, and this is issue 3.
Yeah, so we have issues 1 through 3. Issue 3 is the current one, the new one. We went live last Tuesday, so we've been active for about a week. We're 89% funded at the time of this recording, so we're doing pretty well with about, I think, 23 days left or so on the campaign. I wrote it personally. I think it's our best one yet. I feel like we're kind of coming into our own, getting into the groove of the writing and being a little more critical with the artwork and whatnot. So that's the issue that's live right now.
Awesome. So for everyone listening, what can we expect from this issue?
Well, I think if you're a music lover, I think you'll really enjoy this one. It's basically my take on the Robert Johnson Crossroads Demon story. It's basically about this struggling folk duo, Donnie and Midge. They're a husband and wife, traveling country western duo. They're down on their luck. They're not having any success getting their songs, picked up by a label. Donnie is succumbing to alcoholism. He's lost his job, and they have this one last ditch attempt at trying to make a hit song, a hit record. Basically madness ensues. Donnie pleads to God to give him something, give him anything to keep going. And something in the darkness of space answers. And we don't know if it's God or if it's something else, but everything changes for the couple. Success follows, and eventually the entity comes to collect on their bargain. So if you're a music lover, we're doing all types of cool stuff. We're trying to make it like an immersive kind of multimedia experience. So another local comic creator, a good friend of mine, hooked me up with a musician friend of his, and he's actually writing the songs for the album. So we have an album that we're going to be doing. We have a vinyl jacket, tour poster, tour T-shirts, all that good stuff to kind of accompany the comic book.
Awesome. Now, obviously, anyone listening, this is a familiar story. I think we're all familiar with. The devil went down to Georgia. The Crossroads Demon. Myself, Supernatural fan, and everyone else. We all know about the Crossroads Pact. I'm assuming that obviously was a main inspiration to some degree of this.
For sure, man. Yeah, kind of subconsciously in a way. I didn't necessarily write, start writing thinking to myself, all right, I'm going to make my own Crossroads story. Yeah. That's kind of what it ended up being. And, I think it's fun. I think it's an interesting take on the story. The artwork, I think, is amazing. We're doing black and white and like a green color splash to kind of personify this cosmic entity.
Yeah.
So the artwork is incredible. We have all types of cool, foil and glow in the dark cover options on the Kickstarter, and then all the musical, accoutrement basically to accompany the book.
Yeah. Now, is it difficult writing an issue like this because you set up obviously a big bad entity, which everyone always, I mean, you always love the reveal and where it came from and what it's doing there. But then obviously, like if you got really attached to it, which I think most writers do to some degree, get attached to their characters. You're like, oh man, do I want to continue this story, or well, this is the story was meant to end. Did you have any struggles with that, or was it you felt you were able to get your story out in the pages necessary?
A little bit of both, to be honest with you. I feel like I'm happy with the ending. I feel like we were able to tell the story that we wanted to tell. But in that time period, I've been working on this issue for probably 8 or 9 months with this artist. Writing the script and all that stuff. I've gotten attached to the characters.
Yeah, of course.
Plus we're doing the record, and so we have all this extra accompanying artwork that's not even in the book. Just to go along with the comic. So yeah, definitely got attached to them. I would love to revisit their story at some point. But we're kind of approaching Tales from Toxic Pond kind of in the same way that Marvel approached books back in the 70s. You would have characters like Iron Fist or Shang-Chi pop up in like Marvel Premiere, Special Marvel Edition. They wouldn't necessarily pop up in Shang-Chi #1. You know what I mean? So we're kind of using Tales from Toxic Pond as a way to maybe even springboard future projects and future titles by showcasing these characters in a one-shot, through this anthology series.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question that I was very interested in. Obviously, you said this was kind of like an inspiration of Tales from the Crypt. That's, their anthology and how they did different things. But then we now have new anthologies. And even Twilight Zone did to a degree where they do recognize that's what happened in other issues is in a shared universe.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a possibility as you keep making these issues that we are going to see that there maybe is an almighty overseer, almost like the Watcher, who is kind of seeing these tales from his own toxic pond, that's what we're being told to?
Yeah, so actually, right from the jump, we have a Rod Serling crypt keeper type character. His name is Doc. He's this blind old man who plays the banjo, and I kind of envision him as like this guardian of Toxic Pond, and he kind of introduces the stories and then pops up in the story as a different character or as a different person. And then he gives us the outro also to kind of wrap up and conclude what we just read about in the book. So he, for the most part, he's the only recurring character, and he has appeared in all 3 books so far, actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Have you ever thought about hiding things from other books into a next story just for like those fans of yours that have kind of been with issue 1 up until now?
Oh yeah. Issue 3 is chock full of Easter eggs, including the song titles from the album. They allude to things that have happened in the first 2 issues and some of the issues that have yet to be released. So yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Now, obviously, the nice thing about doing Kickstarters like these and the fact that you guys are kind of going to the printer and getting your own books is always having backup copies or having extra copies. I'm assuming with this Kickstarter, if someone is interested and they're like, man, issue 3 sounds great, I would love to read issue 1 and 2. I am assuming that there is a tier for that as well, either digital or physical.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we have digital and physical backup tiers, including all of the covers from issues 1 and 2. And we also have them available at our website, SpaceChimpsComics.com. You can go over there and you can order a copy. I think we're digital on globalcomics.com also. But so we have the physical and digital backup tiers, pretty reasonably priced, I think, for people to pick up the past issues. So, yeah.
Definitely. Now, it sounds like you guys have had a lot of fun doing this story. I think horror is one of those things that when you're starting to write, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I think it's a storyline that we all understand the structure to very easily, from the setup to the build up to the reveal to the conclusion, whatever that conclusion might be. Having gotten your feet wet now with this, and obviously you'll continue because there's so many interesting stories you can tell. And as you probably were writing these 3, you got more ideas as you moved along. Did you find yourself, though, in the midst of writing this one or the other ones, you're like, this was fun, but I like this character. But once if I made him a villain and I decide to make a superhero to fight this villain, and this would be my branch off into the superhero story versus the horror anthology.
Yeah, sort of, actually, man. Yeah, one of our issues that is written and ready to go, just needs to be illustrated, is kind of I wouldn't call it a horror story, but it's more of like a supernatural Twilight Zone-esque type of superhero story that was really enjoyable to write, really enjoyable to work on. It's kind of like a deconstructionist type story that we're hoping to, maybe spin off into like a 4-issue series, that sort of thing, further down the road. But yeah, writing horror, writing like cosmic horror, psychological horror has been fun. And then shifting tone, to a completely different type of story, like a superhero story, was also really interesting. And you really have to get yourself in a different, mindset to work on something like that. Absolutely.
Now, having written kind of almost, I want to say you write from obviously the point of the villain in a kind of a horror or suspense or thriller, but to a degree, you're kind of laying out the villain first and then your heroes follow. When you were writing the superhero story, did you find yourself like, all right, well, here's my superhero, but man, I'm really enjoying the villain more just because it lines up with what I've written previously? Or was it nice to just immediately go into someone that is there to save the day versus putting someone into a calamity?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was interesting to write the perspective of the superhero. To be honest, I really haven't delved into creating like a big bad for this character yet, to be honest with you. So the story is like a Silver Age homage. This superhero who he was one of the Golden Age heroes, and time has kind of passed him by and society has moved on from him. He's no longer needed, right? So there really isn't a big bad, to be honest with you. There is no supervillain that we've created just yet. It's kind of him grappling with a world that no longer needs him, and fighting every day, thug type supervillains, that sort of thing. So to be honest, we really haven't delved into the construction of the supervillain just yet.
Awesome. Now with this story too, Tales from the Toxic Pond, as we kind of go back to that, you obviously have a lot of stories in mind, as has been hinted. If anyone listens to the vinyl and the music, and then maybe they can get an idea of what's to come. How far would you like to take kind of this anthology? Because an anthology can go on. Even by the time you separate volumes, and I would assume once you get to a certain point, you would consider doing like a hardcover with like the wraparound and kind of really volumizing your work. How far would you like to see this go?
Oh man, that's a good question. Yeah, there's no end in sight for us, to be honest with you. It's kind of this ongoing thing. It's kind of become a joke with my dad and I at this point, where we'll be talking or we'll see something happen on the street, or we'll be watching TV and we're like, oh, that could be a Tales from Toxic Pond. That could be a Toxic Pond story. So he and I are just constantly writing. We have like 3 or 4 issues already banked. He has 2 more issues completed. Artwork is already completed, ready to hit Kickstarter. So yeah, hopefully for the foreseeable future, this is kind of like an ongoing thing for us, and eventually, we'll branch out and work on some other titles. But for now, the flagship is, Tales from Toxic Pond.
Definitely. Is there a certain point of issues that you would get to a point where you would like to cut it off as like volume 1, versus as we maybe announced that we're starting volume 2? Do you have like a number in mind, or is it just kind of when it feels right to like we have enough that?
Yeah, I think we're planning on doing a trade paperback hardcover after issue 5. So sometime next year. And then we're also working on like a silent holiday issue where we have kind of mini comics. So we're planning on doing 4 12-page stories for like a holiday issue, and we're going to collect that also. But yeah, probably after the first 5 issues, we're thinking of doing trade paperback, collected hardcover round, and have that hit Kickstarter sometime next year.
Yeah. Now, funny enough, as we get ready to release this, were you thinking when you started this Kickstarter, like, man, we're so close to Halloween, but we're gonna miss like a Halloween issue just by like a couple months of, or when you're making issue 3, where you're like, I really like the story, but I wonder, like, do I do a Halloween and get this ready for an October release?
No, we definitely toyed around with doing a Halloween special issue.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the issue was delayed with the printer. We were expecting it back probably close to 2 months before we actually got it back. So unfortunately, that delayed issue 3 also, just because we wanted to have issue 2 in people's hands first. So yeah, maybe next year we'll be doing the Halloween special for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. If you had to pick one Halloween superstition that you could make a story off of, do you have a favorite? Like not blowing out the jack-o'-lantern before midnight, or going off of one of those Halloween myths?
Oh man, that's a good question. I've always loved weird things happening to trick-or-treaters on
Definitely.
Halloween.
I think we all do.
I was very blessed to have a stepfather that was super into Halloween, and he would dress up and make himself look like one of those animatronics, and just sit on the porch with the candy bowl and scare kids when they came up to him. So I've always kind of envisioned kind of playing on that concept a little bit, for Halloween. But yeah, I think it'd be fun to do something like that.
Oh, definitely. I would say most of us at this point, and I could say this within my generation of 90s kids, for most of us, I'd say now that make up a majority of the comic book community, we were or mid 80s to 90s.
Yeah.
Goosebumps Haunted Mask, I think we all can draw.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the spookiest things as a kid that really stuck with you and terrified you
Yeah.
thoroughly.
For sure. Goosebumps were my jam in the 90s.
Yes. Even Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, even though I know I'll never get a sequel to that movie.
I know,
that was
man.
Very good. But yeah, a Halloween issue, that would be fun. Even Christmas. The Deviant, I think, proved that to me, that Christmas really can be a frightening time.
Oh, absolutely. And then there was a great 80s, I think it was 80s, maybe even late 70s anthology called Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yes.
That's awesome too. So yeah, it can definitely be done even on the holiest of holidays.
Exactly. We got a lot to look forward to. Now, obviously, you guys have a really great thing going with you and your father. You guys great chemistry. As you expand, as you add in more storylines, is there a thought of, as we maybe expand SpaceChimpsComics, to including or trying to find possibly another writer or another local indie artist that is looking to kind of start their work, and would be interested in taking a piece of this or writing this story? Is that something you would like to do as you grow, or for right now you just would rather keep it kind of close knit, and really hone in on the stories that you guys are telling?
No, we have some feelers out to some other local creators, some other guys that are kind of looking to get into the industry. Yeah. I think we're thinking of putting together like a kind of mini graphic novel sized collection next year of 6 to 8 page stories featuring, work from different writers, and putting together a true anthology, and then maybe, bringing people into the fold a little bit if we like them and we work well together and whatnot. But yeah, right now we're kind of just enjoying doing this together, and we'll see what the future holds.
Definitely. Before we get to links and stuff and where we can find everything, as you've been writing comics, you can easily find kind of what you're strong at and what you kind of want to improve on. Now that this is your third book and you have a lot under your belt, can you say kind of thoroughly what your positives are and kind of what you're looking to improve on?
Yeah, I think one of my positives is writing dialogue. I think reading Garth Ennis and being a fan of filmmakers like Tarantino, you kind of want to look for that kind of quick, snappy, witty dialogue, stuff that sounds believable. So I think that's one of my strengths, especially with this new issue. A lot of it is, very country western, 1960s, 1970s inspired dialogue, so we're trying to be true to the era, but also sound like something a real person would say,
Definitely.
So dialogue, I would say, is definitely something that I excel in. Things, areas where I can improve, probably my lettering abilities. I've lettered the last 2 issues and I'm still very much a beginner. I'm still learning how to letter properly and letter, sound effects and all that stuff. A lot of room for growth there.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe being critical of the artwork. Right now, I kind of just allow the artists to do their own thing. And interpret the work the way they want to, but eventually down the road, I'm going to have to, be a little more critical, I guess, with certain aspects of the artwork. But right now it's been working really well, and I've enjoyed the interpretations of the artists that we've worked with.
Definitely. No. And I think that's fair. Number one, lettering, for anyone that has decided never to crack open a comic and look, letterers might be the most underappreciated people.
100%.
You think that they're just using a stencil to put like an L. There's a measurement to that L, and the way that they put that L down is simply amazing. So I would say you're definitely not alone in lettering skills. I think you could look at Jim Lee and say, Jim Lee, can you letter this? And I don't know if he could draw you Batman. He could draw it really well, but I don't think he could letter Batman across it.
You're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just it's a special kind of person to really devote their time to that.
100%, man. Yeah.
And it's funny with the artwork too, because, and I think people I've talked to, it's such a fine line that you don't want to police your artist,
right,
and make them feel that they have to draw something because they have strengths, and you're, to some degree, you're kind of writing the story in that style to play to their strengths because it only helps your story get told.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you wrote, main character is a 6 foot tall, blonde hair, blue eyed guy, he's like, oh no, I decided to go 5'4" Italian guy. You're like, all right, well, no, that's not. There gets to a point where you have to be like, all right, well, cool concept, but this is how I saw my story. And I think that's one of those things, the relationships that you build and how to manage them in the comic book industry is a whole TED talk within itself that I'm really surprised has not come out yet.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I haven't had any issues with anybody. I've loved seeing the way they interpret the work, and so yeah. I mean, knock on wood, we don't have any issues. Obviously, if there are big things like you said, that completely contradict my script, something has to be said. But for the most part, it's cool just kind of seeing where they go with it, and the more comfortable they get with the story as they continue drawing it is pretty cool too.
Definitely. And kind of a few questions before we wrap up. For everyone listening, I think a lot of indie creators sometimes feel that they don't have anything to share with people that are listening. And we always like to encourage our readers that there is no straight line in comic books. Mm-hmm. It's great if you could go to Kubert School and graduate top honors and go right into Marvel. That is awesome. We support that. But there are other ways to do it. And there's many ways to get better at writing art, putting together comic books. Is there anything that you wish that you would have known from issue 3 that really would have drastically improved the efficiency, maybe, or just some of the steps you took from issue 1?
I think with issue 1 was a huge learning experience in terms of building an issue. It was an oversized 36-page issue. Wow. There were a lot of extra pages that were illustrated that kind of had small things, that were inconsistencies with the rest of the book that I didn't notice until after the book was completed. And so I kind of, you kind of waste a little bit of money, with the learning experience, So I think starting small, starting with a 24 page book, really being focused, really having, a concise vision of what you want to make, and then just kind of being resilient, kind of going for it, man. Don't get stressed out. Don't get discouraged if, you don't have backers right away, if you're not making $10,000 off of your first issue. I mean, you have to build an audience. You have to start somewhere, you just have to keep going for it. If it's your dream, you just got to keep doing it.
Definitely. And especially with the inconsistencies, I think a lot of times people always wonder, like, do I really need an editor? I got 10 friends that love comic books. They'll read it. Yes, right. You 100% need an editor, or at least someone with a very critical sense of writing and artwork, because your friends are always going to be like, yeah, no, this is great. Yep, this is exactly what you told me it would be. Instead of like, yeah, all right, well, you gave this guy a red boot on page 4 and now he has blue boots. So,
right.
And you need that in the comic industry, because there will be someone that goes on to Instagram or Facebook and says, this guy doesn't know his colors and he can't keep them straight. And it's a weird comment to make, but someone will undoubtedly make it.
No, 100%, man. And you can look at that book 100 times yourself and you won't notice something, and the one time somebody else looks at it, they're going to spot something you didn't see. So yeah, it's invaluable.
Yeah. Well, I always wondered too, because I think a lot of people, how difficult it is to finally put down the issue when you're done. Because obviously you've been working on this for a long time, but at some point you had to be like, all right, like it's done. Like it's going for like a draft, like everything. Like physically have to put my hands off of it.
For me, it's extremely difficult because I'm also doing the lettering too,
Yeah.
so the finished product is so vastly different from the script that I give to the artist, just because, when I get the pages back and I look at the bubbles and I'm like, well, this dialogue might sound a little better here. So it's almost like, thank God I'm not hiring a letterer, because I'd be bothering the hell out of them, having them edit this thing constantly, but yeah, eventually, man, there just comes a time where you just gotta put it down and call it good and send it to the printer. I don't really have a good answer for that, to be honest with you. It's kind of whenever the campaign is done and I'm like, okay, people are expecting this book, I have to send it off.
Awesome. Well, we're definitely going to look forward. So we got issue 3, Tales from the Toxic Pond. We are live on Kickstarter now, and we'll provide the link with it. So how long do we have? And this kind of a rundown. Obviously, you don't want to go through all your tiers, but what are we looking at in terms of the different tiers, just for everyone listening?
Yeah, so we have digital editions, digital deluxe that comes with a copy of the script, cover galleries, pencils and inks, pages that were omitted from the final product. We have 3 different covers. We have a cover A, B, and C, and then we also have variants of those covers. So we have a metal cover. We have a virgin glow in the dark cover of
Awesome.
one of what I think is my favorite cover in the whole book. We do like this really cool green glow in the dark edition of it. And then we have all the fun music stuff, so we have the vinyl jacket that you can get. We have t-shirts, stickers, magnets, postcards, bumper stickers, all types of cool stuff. Every physical comic comes with a digital copy. It's going to come with an MP3 download for one of the songs that was written for the book. And then all types of fun stretch goals and stuff like that too, man. So hopefully the more backers we get, the more cool stuff we can keep adding on to the project.
Awesome. So for everyone listening, we will have that link posted to the comments below. If you are listening to this or seeing this on Instagram or YouTube, head over and look for that link. Now, SpaceChimpScomics on Instagram, that is the best way to keep up to date with you guys and what your next project is.
Yeah, we're on all social media. You can find me on Facebook, Daniel Torres. We also have a SpaceChimpComics page. But yeah, typically Instagram and Twitter, or I guess it's X now, probably the best way to find us. I'm on there every day. I'm a lot more into social media now that I'm doing comic books than I ever was before. So if you shoot me a message, or you need something, or you have any questions, feel free, and I'll be more than happy to get back to you.
All right, perfect. And then just the final thing. So when our campaign is end, when would we be looking on getting the book?
So I believe the last day of the campaign is September 29th. Usually takes about 2 weeks for Kickstarter to release the funds, and then 2 weeks to get the books back from the printer. So you're looking at sometime in late October into the first week of November.
All right, that's actually pretty damn quick.
Yeah, and actually with the second issue, the day the campaign ended, we had the digital copies sent out to all the backers. So the day that it ended, you were able to read your digital copy. So the book is 100% done. It's already completed. We're just paying for the printing costs at this point. So yeah, the day the campaign ends, you will have your digital copy.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, if you are interested in Tales from the Toxic Pond issue 3 and catching up on the other issues, follow the link below, subscribe to the Kickstarter, follow SpaceChimpScomics, and hopefully we'll have you guys back as you keep putting these issues out, and we'll talk about what you got on the horizon.
Absolutely, man. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having us on, and I look forward to being on again.
Perfect. Everyone listening, I hope you had fun. Follow us, follow them, wherever you get your social media, podcast, and videos. Everyone listening, have a good night.